Hi, everyone. I'm James Garbutt.
And I'm Denny Dumas.
And this is the Garbutt Dumas Real Estate Podcast.
Jamie, we've got a federal election coming up in 1 week, September 20th, I believe. Is that right, Carl? All right, September 20th. And all of them are talking about real estate, how to make housing more affordable, some big changes potentially coming to Canadian real estate across the board. As someone who has spent very little time researching what the actual parties' platforms are in the past, I kind of took a dive into all of what they are talking about real estate wise, just so we can kind of share some topics. But I would strongly suggest reading through these things. There is some actually pretty good ideas being talked about. There are some awful ones. And so for time restraints, we are not going to touch on every single real estate policy that every single party has, but we're going to share some highlights and kind of how we think this could affect local markets of Greater Vancouver. So I'm going to let Jamie, and I know you're a big politics guy.
Oh, on top of it every day.
I'm going to let you pick the party that we start with, and then we can just kind of discuss a few of their ideas and how that's going to affect local markets.
Yeah, and I think there, I did a little bit of digging too, and I do feel that there are some consistent messages across all the parties. And overall, I struggle with a federal election, and I mean the purpose of this is what are the different parties talking about that may affect the real estate market, real estate supply, and affordable housing seems to be the number one term that I see coming up. And affordable housing is controlled by supply, which is controlled by municipalities, and we were talking about a federal election. So a lot of the frustration I have with this is promises that are made by these by everybody that are really out of their control largely. I mean, you can provide incentives, but there's systematically municipalities are in the driver's seat of supply, and it is the promises that are being made on a federal level don't really get specific on how to the actual. I want to see what are the actual action items on the municipality level that's going to change that. So, But before we get into it, Denny, let's, as per your request, let's start with say the Liberals.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Trudeau has made some big promises in the last 8 years. How long has he been in power? No, 6 years. 6 years. He called an early election. There's some actually good ideas in here, and there are some ones that literally make no sense. So let's start with the good. They mentioned they would like to build 1.4 million new homes in the next 10 years. How is that going to be achieved? No details. They also have this idea, and I think this is a really, really interesting idea, but like Jamie just said, how is this going to be implemented? Is they would like to help cities accelerate housing construction. Good idea?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
How does that come to fruition? I don't know. Let's talk about some of the things that maybe they have more control over that are, this other one. So homelessness is becoming more and more of a problem in big cities like Vancouver. And one of their topics was they're going to invest $72 billion over 10 years in affordable housing to address homelessness. How is that going to be done? I don't know.
I mean, they may have funds allocated to it, but it still involves someone having the incentive to build the structure.
Exactly.
I mean, the government's not the developers. So the developers need to show up and do it. And but you can throw money at a problem. Maybe it works. The supply is, I guess politically you have to make promises on affordable housing towards increasing the supply. And clearly from what you're reading, there's a lot of lack of specifics in terms of action items to get there.
Totally. They want to start a new tax-free savings account for first-time buyers. So this is any Canadian under 40 as a first-time buyer will have a tax-free account set up to save up to $40,000 to use on their first home.
The I guess the slogan for them is more homeowners, right? They're trying to create more homeowners. And I read that part, a tax-free first-time savings account, rent-to-own program, double the first-time homebuyer tax credit, reduce mortgage insurance, and combine those four things will save upwards of $30,000 for a typical first-time homebuyer.
Yeah.
It's going to have a marginal impact. I mean, some people people that take advantage of the full program, upwards of $30,000. I mean, it's gonna move the needle a tiny bit, but it's not gonna move the needle a lot. But that was, I mean, from my point of view, I thought that was a little more specific than I got from the other parties on what they're gonna do. So that's a positive there, but it's better than doing nothing.
To me, a lot of the policy over the last, however long I've been in real estate, 8 years, has been a lot of fluff. Like, there's a lot of ideas. There's a lot of promises that really aren't helping the average everyday consumer or the first time buyer. Like, maybe that $40,000 tax-free account helps slightly, but there's already the tax-free savings account, and someone who is able to save whatever the max of tax-free savings account is now, $60K or something like that. Someone who's able to save $60K in the tax-free savings account plus another $40K in this new tax-free account probably isn't having a problem buying their first home, right? If they're able to save $100,000.
I think overall, it's just such a small percentage of the population that's going to reap the rewards of this.
Sure.
And it helps. For anything that helps first-time buyers is great. And if that means saving some taxes on your investments to help you get that down payment, great. Mm-hmm. If that means lower mortgage insurance so that your premium on a loan, like all these things have a little impact, but it's not gonna have as much of an impact as an increased supply would.
Yeah.
Like overall, if there's one thing that needs to be done, you need more homes.
Totally. And I've read this rent to own program thing 3 times, and I have no idea how it's what it means. So I'm just going to read the first bullet point.
Okay.
And you're going to tell me if anyone understands this. So introduce a new rent to own program to help make it easier for renters to get on the path towards homeownership while renting. The program will be designed based on 3 principles. The landlord must commit to charging a renter a lower than market rate to help Canadians build up savings for a down payment. The landlord must commit to ownership in a 5-year term or less, and proper safeguards will be in place to protect the future homeowner.
This comes down to landlord incentives.
Exactly.
So how is the landlord incentivized to do that is the big missing part.
I mean, my first feeling on this is I'm assuming that they're talking about new rental-only buildings moving forward. It's not going to be an individual, right? It's not like you own a rental property, you have one condo that's a 2-bedroom condo. What would be the incentive for you to sign up for this rent-to-own program as a landlord?
If you're doing rent-to-own, that's almost a complete new category of real estate. Right now, you have apartment rental buildings that are a commercial real estate asset. There's probably difference in the building code. They're owned by one person. So you have one landlord that owns a 20-unit building, and those 20-unit buildings that are rental buildings are usually designed differently than a stratified building. So if they're talking about rental buildings being those individual units being sold off, and the landlord has to commit to a 5-year price today with a more affordable renting revenue in the meantime, it's probably not going to happen with existing buildings. No. So this would have to happen with a new zoning being implemented by all cities, or the cities that they want this, that would give developers an incentive to actually do this. So how do you incentivize a developer to get affordable renters in and also commit to a price 5 years out, if that's what they're saying there? You got to give them more buildable space, for one. But one of the big challenges there is it's going to come down to financing. Part of the, I guess, appeal of doing, say, if you're a developer and you're building a multifamily mixed use or low rise building, you are doing a pre-sale to get the finances to build that. In this case, you can't really do that pre-sale that the banks want to see, to say you've sold out 50% of your units, 70% of your units, whatever it is, to get the financing to do the build.
Yeah.
So you're not getting the typical financing sort of structure that we would get for developers just doing stratified units. If you're doing an apartment rental building, you're putting together you buy your land, you do your pro forma, you hope that you look at your rental rates, and those got to be those market rental rates. Usually want to be market rental rates, or a good rental rate to get the financing to justify the building. And so if you're doing that kind of development, at what point do you switch it from apartment rental to stratified? Is my question. It's a complex thing. I like the rent to own idea. I think that comes down, that's a very complicated thing. It's a city thing, and it's a world that we don't live in today. So
I almost think it has to be like government owned buildings that they're renting to Canadians that they implement this program for. Like, it's not, like you said, it comes down to incentive for an individual person that owns, let's say, a 40 unit condo building that is 100% rental. What's the incentive for them to do this?
That's a good question, Denny.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's a good question. A rent to own is complex for a number of reasons, but it is a good idea in theory. But ultimately, I think maybe at a federal level they can do something for that, but at a city level, if I'm looking at the potential of a land and I'm looking at the zoning potential, it's going to say you can build apartments, rental housing, or stratified units. And this is kind of what I'm reading here is a hybrid of both.
Yeah.
It's rental that gets converted to strata. And I don't understand. I mean, they're maybe more specific in their campaign, but that is a challenging one.
Yeah. Okay, let's end the Liberals with 2-year ban on foreign buyers.
Well, I think the foreign buyer thing, let's acknowledge that was like a consistent theme across all parties. Like, I think, all the main parties anyway, they all had a 2-year ban on foreign buyers. And I'm very curious to know what impact, like Vancouver or BC has a 20% foreign buyers tax. And since it's been implemented in 2016, I don't know how much revenue it's collected. I don't know how many foreign buyers are actually buying. So I feel like the foreign buyers, obviously when all the main parties have it, it's a big political slogan that gets a lot of buy-in from the public.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't actually think I don't see foreign buyers as a major problem right now. And I'm just saying that subjectively. I don't have data. I'd love to have the data on how much the BC foreign buyer tax collected in 2018, 2019, 2020. I just couldn't find it on Google. So I don't see a lot out in the field. Mm-hmm. And for that reason, I don't think I think upping it is good, because it just creates a consistent, well, I don't know if you need to ban it, but like a 20% foreign buyer tax is a real, and reduces the incentives.
Sure.
So banning it versus 20%, to me, it's the same thing.
And I just don't think this is in any way going to help the average Canadian consumer buy a house. So like, look at our Greater Vancouver. Tell me if you're shaking your head, so maybe you think I'm incorrect. But so like the average, let's say the entry-level single-family home in lots of Greater Vancouver right now is somewhere between 1.2 and 1.8, depending on what neighborhood you're in. We mentioned North Van is now close to 1.8. Foreign buyers are not buying those. The demand is so high that limiting foreign buyers, even if there are few and far between ones out there, it's not making housing more affordable. It's not making less people want to purchase those homes. The average 2-bedroom condo in the suburbs of Greater Vancouver is not being purchased by a foreign buyer, so that is not limiting the demand there. It's potentially going to hurt those like super luxury properties in West Vancouver, in the west side of Vancouver, that are $7, $10, $12, $15 million. But that's not making housing more affordable. And they're selling it as this big thing, which is kind of my frustration with a lot of this stuff that I've read over the last few days, is just they're selling it as helping Canadians and helping the average middle-class person. And there's very few of these details and these policies that are actually helping middle-class people.
My guess in Greater Vancouver is that if foreign buyers have an impact on any market, it would be new pre-sale condos, new construction condos, and luxury, like high-end homes. And even then, I think it's a small percentage.
Yeah.
I think the one nice thing about this market is, I mean, even though it is frustrating for buyers and great for sellers, it is locals. It is driven by locals. It's nice seeing that it's local people that are, like, I mean, North Van has become the popular suburb of choice for a lot of, wealthier or Vancouver proper residents that want a little more space. But that it's locals that are just moving around.
Yeah.
That's a nice little difference. Before we move on, like, I want to mention a couple other things from the Liberals. They had this Build More Homes campaign that talks about converting office space into housing.
Yeah.
Great in theory, but again, supply, I mean, that's going to be a small percentage of the needs. And then they talk about a homebuyers bill of rights, which talks about banning blind bidding and insured mortgage deferrals. So the banning blind bidding part, that's a complex one. I mean, it's more of, I think the thought there is to go to more of an auction style sale for real estate. And I think even though the intent there is to create a better buyer experience, even if you hate blind bidding, and what blind bidding means is when you're in a multiple offer situation, you submit your offer with 5 or 10 others. You don't know exactly how many are submitted. You don't know what the others' offers are. You don't know where you measure up, and then you hope for the best. That is not fun for buyers, but the alternative to that is auction style. And I think that is, well, right now we have certain brokerages that even offer auction style sales. I think that should remain a smaller percentage of sales because not everything goes into multiple offers. And if buyers show up in an auction environment for every house that comes up, it's going to be complicated. Well, one, you're going to have times where the market has a lot of listings. So you're going to have houses where auctions aren't effective because the market isn't in the seller's favor. And then when it's a buyer's market, geez, I mean, could you imagine, like, an auction environment would probably lead to higher sale prices because people would get caught up in the moment of watching parties bid each other up.
And I think it would just bring in like a new world of problems that we necessarily haven't seen in Greater Vancouver, such as acceleration clauses, saying, okay, whatever the best offer is, my buyer will offer $10,000 higher than that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, the best offer just went up 50 grand. Okay, well, mine's 10 higher.
One key issue with auction style over the blind bidding is it forces buyers to do due diligence prior to offering. So arguably, if you're having a true offer style, you want to have buyers offer with subject-free, clean, unconditional price and just cleaner offers, because that makes the offer, that actually makes the focus on price. So forcing buyers to do all their due diligence prior to an auction-style purchase, that's kind of like, yes, it happens now by choice, but if that becomes the norm, that's going to be frustrating for buyers. Ultimately, I understand the issues with our current system, but the alternative isn't, in my opinion, isn't going to solve it, and it's going to create a little more transparency for the buyers at the burden of ultimately, in my opinion, a worse buying experience. There will be exceptions to that, but as a whole, buyers will be frustrated. They'll be spending more money on due diligence. They'll be missing out on just as many homes. They'll just be more transparent with how they're missing out.
Yeah.
And then one other thing is just stop excess profits and financialization of housing. So like this is what this was referring to in the Liberals campaign is a lot of developers and people that are making money in real estate, excessive profits, are using bank money to get there. I don't know how you change that. That is a complex thing, but that is one of the things that was mentioned from the Liberals. So Denny, any other comments on Liberals or?
No, let's move on.
How about NDP?
Okay, NDP, I only have a few notes. The foreign buyer ban is there as well. One of their big ones that I didn't read in the other parties' platforms, but increase cap gains to 75%. So right now, capital gains is 50% of the gain is taxable on your personal income. So they're talking about increasing that to 75% of the capital gain is taxable.
I guess I should remind people that this is for residential real estate. And if you were a commercial real estate owner and you sold your commercial property, if you reinvest that money within 12 months, you pay no capital gains. So there's a big reason why you want to own commercial real estate over the long term over residential, because of that current little tax advantage alone. That can obviously change. So typically, commercial real estate are deeper pocketed, wealthy individuals or pension funds or whatever it is. This does not affect them in any way. So this affects the more typical regular homeowner or investor. And yeah, it will collect more revenue. I mean, I sold my in-laws' house last month. They're going to have a $200,000 capital gains tax that payable. This means that they would have, what would it, $300,000. That's going to get you more revenue. Is it going to solve? But they own the home for 20 years. So really that capital gains is ultimately going to just affect people that have owned homes for a long time that have gone up significantly in value. And yes, it'll get to more revenue. Will that revenue be spent wisely? I don't know, Denny. Will it affect housing prices? I don't think it's going to have a big impact. It's just going to be more taxes.
The first thing that I thought of when I heard this is the investor type person probably is going to hold on to properties longer.
True. So that would ultimately pinch supply further.
Correct.
Because there's less incentive to sell.
Yes.
Yeah. Good point.
Which is the opposite effect of what they want to happen, right? One other interesting thing that NDP was talking about was Cmhc mortgages. So insured mortgages, if you're putting down less than 20%, you have an insurance premium. They're talking about decreasing that premium, which I think the Liberals talked about too, but they're also increasing the amortization of those insured mortgages to 30 years instead of 25. So yes, for the individual person that is currently owns or has a insured mortgage or is in the process of buying their first home and having an insured mortgage, it's going to help them be slightly more affordable because their mortgage payments will be slightly more affordable. But if more people can afford housing, what does that do?
Prices go up.
Exactly.
Is this just for first-time home buyers, or is it for the amortization one, or is that for across the board, or do you know?
So I may be incorrect, but the note I made was just CMHC CMHC mortgages are going to go up to 30%. Yeah. So any insured mortgages.
The thing that happens whenever you make what we've observed in real estate in the last little while is whenever you increase the lending ability of people, say if first-time buyers or if the buyer population has some sort of new thing that comes into place that increases their lending by 5%, it seems like it just takes a couple of months for that 5% to trickle its way into the new norm of real estate prices. And then real estate goes up by that exact amount.
Yeah.
So it or more, depending on the momentum of the market. But that is great if it's just for first-time home buyers and it's a little extra edge on them, but ultimately it's going to increase prices further because you're adding more money to the system.
Agree.
Yeah.
That's all I had for NDP. If you've got other things.
I think just...
There's a lot of overlap with the Liberal platform, it seemed like.
I don't want to... everyone has we're going to build 1 million homes, $500,000 homes. I think let's ignore the promise of how many homes that are going to get built. And I'd love for specifics on what they're going to do for municipalities to get there. But no, how about the Conservatives?
So... There's a couple little more, let's say, detailed points they had. So they note that both other parties, in terms of the two big ones, NDP and Liberal, had talked about cap gains. And it's not in their official platform, or I didn't see it, but they've talked about implementing capital gains on principal residences. And so the Conservatives say they will never have cap gains on principal residence.
Okay. They don't want to, that makes sense. Some of the other parties, have any of the other parties committed to that?
No.
But they've
talked about it.
Yeah.
I think NDP's did. I think I heard something that NDP did. Anyway.
And of course, they NDP, Liberal, ban foreign investors for a period of time.
Yeah.
Build more homes.
Yeah.
Create incentives for first-time buyers.
Yeah. This is an interesting one. They don't, again, there's no detail on how this is going to actually happen or what is going to change, but they say they're going to fix the stress test to not hurt self-employed and casual workers. So right now, if you are a self-employed person, you need to show 2 years income, and qualifying with some lenders is very challenging. So I thought that was interesting. I mean, conservative typically have been very pro small business. And so to note something about making lending more affordable for self-employed and casual workers is interesting.
I think that's probably a positive.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's going to still increase prices.
Yeah.
But it is a positive. I mean, as you know, we're basically business owners, sole proprietors. Banks don't like our income as much as an accountant or a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if it was $100,000 of realtor income versus $100,000 of, physician income. So and I would like to think that self-employed people would, on average, if they were given the opportunity to have better loans, they will use that money and take those risks. Maybe not everyone, but a lot of them will.
Yeah.
So I do think that's a positive, but unfortunately, whenever you add to the prices in some way.
Speaking of add, here's another one. Right now, to get a insured mortgage, the maximum purchase price of the home is $1 million. They want to increase that to 1.25.
I don't know, just make it 1.5.
I know.
Just make it 2 million. I don't know. It's a moving target. Whatever you do today, it's not going to be enough tomorrow.
Exactly. Yeah. So they also want to encourage 7 to 10 year mortgage amortizations. Encourage.
So incentivize shorter amortizations?
Longer amortizations.
Oh.
So terms.
Oh, terms.
7 to 10 year terms. So to just explain that a little bit, it's the average fixed year, or the normal kind of fixed term is 5 years of your mortgage, amortization 25 to 30 in a lot of cases. They want those terms, so what you're locking in at, to be longer, which to me sounds scary.
In the US, they do that. In the US, they'll be like 20-year terms, or even maybe 30. I don't know how far up it goes. So there's a big precedent below the border. Mm. Longer terms come with a higher insurance risk premium. So a 7-year term or a 10-year term, if it's a fixed rate mortgage, will be a higher rate than a 5-year term. I mean, that's typically how it goes.
And a higher penalty when you break that term, because most people don't live in their homes for 10 years. Especially,
if they do that, I think they need to address the penalties, because those penalties would be monstrous.
Yeah.
If you're breaking a 10-year fixed term penalty, potentially.
Exactly.
At those rate differentials. I don't think that's going to solve anything. That's just changing things for the risk premium. But ultimately, anyone that I know, I've kind of almost regretted every fixed mortgage I've been in.
Me too.
I think for me, and for, I think even I was talking to Alex McFadden, and maybe I mean, he's a closed variable. People that are in the business tend to lean towards closed variable. And even the fixed rates that I've had have been like 3-year terms or 4-year terms for a lower rate, because they were like close to the variable rate or at the variable rate.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you get, like, for example, we've had clients that had a 1.99 or 1.91 5-year fixed rate. That's pretty tempting. That was existing this year. Mm-hmm. But you're probably still better off with the closed variable.
Probably. Yeah. So this one is really worth mentioning, and it's along your commercial point that you just made. So the Conservatives say they want to encourage Canadians to invest in rental housing by deferring cap gains when you sell a rental property and reinvest in rentals. So basically the same thing as the commercial.
But if you reinvest it.
If you're reinvesting into more rental housing.
I mean, if that's a commercial asset, it's nothing new. If the assumption there is if you buy a rental, I'm making an assumption that they're talking about the stratified rental condo.
I think so.
If you bought it, rented it out. I mean, okay, so how would you, if you bought it, lived in it for 10 years, rented out for 1 year, or,
well, if it's a principal residence, there's no cap gains.
You're not going to pay capital gains on it anyway. I mean, I like that in theory. That would match up the small investor with the commercial investor if it is talking about residential. Mm-hmm. It's not going to help them collect tax revenue. It is going to encourage people to own rentals. I'm neutral on that one, Denny.
Again, it's like encouraging people to put money into real estate, though.
Yeah, ultimately, It's going to lead to higher prices.
Correct.
You're adding more buyers.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and you can maybe see where I'm trying to go with this. But like everyone, politics and I maybe don't get along too well. I just don't understand the mindset of tricking people. And it just seems like everyone's main headline is more affordable housing for Canadians. And most of these points are making housing or encouraging people to spend more money into real estate, which increases prices of real estate. So I think we both have a pretty good idea of what will help affordability, or at least flatten prices for an extended period of time, is more supply. And yes, they all talk about it with zero details of how to actually get more supply.
I'd love some out of the box thinking on doing things in a completely new way. And I guess what I mean by that is if the federal government, I don't know how the world works completely, Denny, but if there was some levers that the federal government can pull on cities and municipalities to force an updated official community plan, force a certain amount of rezoning and more density, or at least not, I say force, incentivize in some way. Ultimately, there needs to be a new way that I don't feel exists today to increase the supply. And then the only other thing is you got to decide who you want buying houses and who you don't want buying houses. You incentivize the ones that you want buying houses. You make it harder for the ones that you don't want buying houses, like foreign buyers, or you penalize luxury, wealthy homeowners. But there's a lot more buyers in that lower segment than the higher one. So anytime you help out the first-time buyer or those lower buyer segments, you're ultimately adding more money in the system. You're increasing lending, and that ultimately drives the prices up in those segments. Mm-hmm. It's a very challenging thing, but the only thing that I see that would actually really make an impact is you either jack up interest rates and make it more more expensive for people, which makes the prices go down, or you do something revolutionary to really increase supply. And I would love to see in the markets we work in just a rezoning happen. A longer term, a lot of these houses that are single family should be triplexes, duplexes. A lot of busy streets should be lined with low rises or townhouses. We today know how to build a really good home. We know these passive homes. We know how to do energy efficient homes. The construction technology that's being implemented now and over the next 5 years is far better than it was anywhere in the past. So we know how to build good homes. Now they just need to put them in the right place. And it's a lot of work for the cities to do those updated official community plans, and they want the public feedback, but sometimes a dictatorship is a good thing. And I think that there needs to be some sort of strong arm there to actually happen, because as long as it's left up to cities to do it on their time, it doesn't seem to be working.
The last thing to mention?
A bit of a tangent, Danny.
Yeah, that's okay. This is what podcasts are for. Again, there's no detail here. So this sounds so good in theory, right? Increase public transit to where people are buying homes. How vague is that? It's a great idea, right? Let's increase the SkyTrain line to go to Langley. Let's increase it to go to...
increase homes around transit, and it's great too. That's what we're doing. Yeah. I think was there anything about the Green Party, Denny? Or, a lot of this is overlapping party to party.
Yeah. No, I didn't even look at the Green Party.
I think the Green Party, one thing, I did look at it, but, the only difference, they were touching on topics that others weren't. They want more co-op housing and more incentives for co-op, which was interesting. Co-ops are something that, cooperative housing is something that exists today, but it's just not prominent. And yeah, maybe there should be more of it in a holistic community kumbaya world where you have live with your neighbors and have outdoor space and common space that feels more like I don't know. Co-ops, I still say co-ops with low-rise buildings, 30 to 40 units instead of, say, 200-unit towers. And that's what I've seen, and they're usually older. I did have someone reach out looking for land to build a co-op a couple months ago, and I was just blown away with how difficult what they're looking for is going to be, because they need affordable prices, because it's for affordable buyers. And the cities don't really, it's just, there's not enough incentive for it right now. So...
what is the advantage of Like, why would they build more co-ops for people?
Oh, geez, I wish we should know more about co-ops to talk about this topic. But essentially, when you own a strata, you own your unit entitlement, your strata lot of the building. When you're in a co-op, you're owning a share of the whole.
Correct. But why would that even be a topic? Because when I look at those, I look at, yes, they cost less money to get into. You don't really own anything other than shares in the building. They're really, really difficult to resell. So you're encouraging people to buy something that is going to be very difficult to get out of. And that has very little opportunity for return, right?
Well, I mean, we're looking at older, like the co-ops that exist are typically 40 years or older.
Mm-hmm.
Like they were a thing back in the day that, or I just haven't seen any new co-ops in the city. So they're more affordable because it's a co-op ownership over freehold. I think co-ops would have to, in order for co-ops to, this is, again, we should know more about the topic to talk about it, but I think for co-ops to be a thing, there would have to be cities incentivizing higher density for a co-op building over a stratified building. And I think there's probably more to it than just this, but when you're owning shares of a whole building as opposed to your own little unit entitlement, maybe there's more of a, you're part of a community because your ownership is a share of that community as opposed to you own your own strata lot and you see strata fees as a burden, but a necessary thing. It might just be a difference of mentality, but in practical sense, co-ops confuse people today. They're more affordable because of that confusion, and they're usually older buildings, that the ones that I've seen it. But if it was a brand new co-op, I think the only way a developer would do a co-op over stratified buildings would be to get more density. And even then, I don't know if the buyers are ready for it.
I don't know if you can answer this question, but that to me sounds like an incentive for the developer to get more square footage. But what is what's the opportunity? What's the incentive for an individual owner?
Ultimately, I hope they're more affordable. Co-ops should be more affordable. Otherwise, why would you do them?
Yeah. I just in Greater Vancouver, real estate is a very good long-term investment. And it seems like, yes, it's more affordable to get into, but it's a worse investment long-term. I guess, again, there's so few of them that we don't deal with them. I've never sold a co-op. Have you?
I've showed
a couple, but I've never sold one. And I have a pretty basic understanding just from
I don't
preparing for them. But
I don't think they solve a lot.
Yeah.
I think there's just, I know there are some people that love them, but I think in a world where our real estate prices are so expensive, I think in New York, they're a thing. They're more prominent, but I don't know. I'd have to look outside of market. For here, it will have it'll have minimal impact. I just don't see that changing much. I don't know why a city would want to give away more density to a co-op versus a freehold. But again, I don't know enough about the topic.
Yeah.
Either way.
Well, that's fun. You've got a few days. I would encourage you to actually review these platforms. I've never done this before in any election.
I think after reviewing them, I don't see that I don't know if I would wait. The affordable housing conversation, I think across the board of the main parties, they all want to do similar things. There might be some differences here or there. I don't know if I would focus your vote on the affordable housing part of this federal election, because I think a lot needs to change for them to have a significant impact on housing.
Totally.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll see what happens, Denny.
See what happens.